Hey guys, can you believe it? A real villain was caught in America, and not only did he do some terrible things, but he also managed to gather a bunch of fans. It's hard to believe, but he even got fan mail and was flooded with revealing photos, hoping that he would be forgiven. And finally, the finale. He was given the maximum sentence. My name is Knox, and today we're going to break down who Wade Wilson is and how his horrific actions led to his absolutely insane popularity. Believe me, the truth is shocking. The news about the criminal spread quickly online, but it probably wouldn't have attracted so much attention if it weren't for one curious detail. The name of the criminal is exactly the same as one of the most popular Marvel characters, Wade Wilson. Moreover, his nickname turned out to be similar to, though slightly altered, Deadpool the Killer. Such a coincidence caused quite a stir. Like the comic book hero, this guy also had no qualms about the thought of murder. However, unlike the chatty mercenary from the Marvel Universe, the real Wilson was sentenced to death in 2024 for first-degree murder and other serious charges. He had already run into trouble with the law before, including burglary, grand theft, and the use of firearms. So who is this real Wade Wilson? Wade Stephen Wilson was born on May 20th, 1994, to underage parents and was adopted by Steve and Candace Wilson. He grew up in Tallahassee, Florida, where he attended Childs High School. Even at a young age, Wilson earned a reputation as a troubled teen, getting into petty offenses and using drugs. In addition, he suffered several traumatic brain injuries during his childhood and teenage years, which, according to him, later intensified his feelings of inner instability. Wilson's first run-ins with the law happened in 2012 in Leon County when he got involved in a series of incidents related to burglary, violence, and the use of firearms. In November 2013, he was convicted of burglary and grand theft, and he was incarcerated until September 2014. In 2015, Wilson faced charges of sexual assault and kidnapping after a woman claimed he attacked her in her car following a party. Nevertheless, the jury acquitted him of those charges. In 2017, Wilson was back in prison for stealing a firearm and stayed there until July 2018. Later that same year, his name came up in the case of Denise Williams, who was found guilty of conspiracy to murder her husband. During the investigation, Wilson allegedly attempted to falsify evidence and even suggested eliminating Williams. In February 2019, his ex-girlfriend reported an incident in which he allegedly attacked her and attempted to strangle her. Despite the initial charges of kidnapping and rape, the investigation declined to press those charges due to a lack of evidence and an existing no-contact order. On July 1, 2019, Wilson was arrested for assault. 7. In 2015, Wilson was arrested for assault. In October 2011, a double murder occurred, and Wade Wilson was the perpetrator. On that fateful evening, he found himself in a bar in Cape Coral, Florida, USA. There, he met 35-year-old Christine Milton. After a brief conversation, the girl invited him to her place. She could never have imagined that instead of a nice evening, death awaited her. Wilson strangled Christine, left her body in the bed, and stole a car from the property. Later that same day, he noticed 43-year-old Diana Ruiz, who was on her way to work. He pulled up next to her and asked for directions. Out of the kindness of her heart, the woman got into his car. There, he attacked her, strangled her, threw her out of the car, and then ran over her body about 20 times until it looked like spaghetti. Unable to keep this terrible secret to himself any longer, Wilson called his biological father and confessed to his crimes. His father lured him into a trap and called the police. A week before Wade Wilson's sentencing, he was questioned by neurologist Dr. Mark Rubin. According to his assessment, the criminal suffered a head injury in 2 serious car accidents, as well as a concussion while playing football and baseball. The defendant's brain was abnormal. Additionally, the frontal lobe was enlarged, which could have affected Wilson's behavior. especially when combined with the drugs he took the night before the crimes. Wilson's ex-girlfriend confirmed that when he was sober, he was a completely different person, but one time he attacked her while under the influence of cocaine. Wilson's adoptive parents reached out to the court with a letter, explaining that their foster child had slipped away from them during his teenage years, suddenly fell into depression and paranoia, and started using drugs. Despite Wilson's mental state evidence, experts said drugs influenced his behavior. Defense said addiction impaired his control during the crime. Wilson's father testified about a phone confession. Defense attorneys, in turn, emphasized that drug addiction could have negatively affected Wilson's ability to control his actions at the time of the crime. Wilson's father testified against him, stating he confessed to hitting Ruiz, aware she was alive, but couldn't explain why. "I wanted to do it that way." 8 jurors recommended the death penalty. The man said his son confessed to hitting Ruiz with his car, fully aware that she was still alive, but couldn't explain his motives, just saying, "I just wanted to do it that way." 8 out of 12 jurors recommended the death penalty for Wilson. In the end, 9 voted for the death penalty for the murder of Melton, and 10 for the murder of Ruiz. Judge Nicholas Thompson upheld both death sentences. Wilson filed an appeal with the Florida Supreme Court. Wilson's sentence generated public interest and controversy, with numerous requests for clemency. This case raised questions about the connection between mental disorders, criminal behavior, and the justice system. The extensive media coverage was not only due to the crime itself, but also due to the fact that Wilson's name is the same as the popular Marvel Comics character Wade Wilson, aka Deadpool. Public reaction was mixed, with some expressing sympathy for Wilson's mental health problems and others condemning him for his brutal crimes. After the guilty verdict was handed down in June 2024, it was revealed that the killer had received approximately 4,000 letters and 754 photographs from his fans and supporters, of which 163 were of an indecent nature and contained intimate material. These fans begged the court to change the death sentence to life in prison for their idol. It was reported that Wilson's aggressive behavior could have been caused by prolonged drug use and an undiagnosed mental disorder. Wilson's fans couldn't convince the judge to reduce the killer's sentence to life in prison. When the judge announced the death sentence, the courtroom erupted in applause. Wade himself was completely indifferent at that moment. There were no emotions reflected on his face. In Florida, inmates can expect to wait about 14 years for their death sentence to be carried out. All this time, they are kept in solitary cells, receive 3 meals a day, and spend almost the entire day in isolation. They are not allowed to visit the common areas of the prison. While in jail awaiting trial for the murders, Wilson got several tattoos on his face, including a swastika under his right eye and another one on the side of his head. In 2020, Wilson and his cellmate were charged with attempting to escape, which involved breaking a window in their cell. It is reported that Wilson was the main organizer of this escape attempt and was also trying to find a car for the getaway. In 2023, Wilson pleaded guilty to smuggling drugs into prison in exchange for dropping the charges related to the escape attempt. He was sentenced to a fine and a 12-year prison term, which he will serve concurrently with his death sentence. Also in 2023, Wilson suffered a drug overdose in the Lee County Jail. This case led to an investigation by the Lee County Sheriff's Department. The investigation uncovered a scheme for smuggling drugs into the prison. In the end, besides Wilson, charges were brought against 4 other individuals. Stay tuned, and you'll learn about the most high-profile executions in U.S. history, as well as those that were carried out in 2024. On December 26, 1862, the largest execution in U.S. history took place in Dakota, where 38 people were hanged at once for murder and rape committed during wartime. On June 16, 1944, 14-year-old George Stinney was executed in the U.S., making him the youngest person to be executed in America in the 20th century. A black teenager has been convicted of killing 2 underage white girls in South Carolina. 70 years later, In 2014, the conviction was overturned and George Stinney was posthumously acquitted as a victim of a miscarriage of justice. On January 24, 1989, the infamous serial killer Ted Bundy was executed, earning the nickname the Nylon Killer for using nylon stockings to strangle his victims. The number of his victims ranges from 30 to 100 young women he killed in the 1970s. For using nylon stockings to strangle his victims. The number of his victims ranges from 30 to 100 young women he killed. In the 1970s, on May 10, 1994, another infamous serial killer, John Wayne Gacy, was executed in Illinois. From 1972 to 1978, he committed the rape and murder of 33 people. In March 1980, Gacy was sentenced to 21 life terms and 12 death sentences. 11. And the murder of 33 people. In March 1980, Gacy was sentenced to 21 life terms and 12 death sentences. In June 2001, ultra-right terrorist Timothy McVeigh was executed in Terre Haute, Indiana. He had previously been convicted for the bombing on April 19, 1995, at the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. As a result, 168 people died and over 680 were injured. This attack was considered the largest on U.S. soil until the events of September 11, 2001. On November 15, 2002, Pakistani-born Islamic terrorist Amal Qazi was executed in Virginia. In 1993, he opened fire on cars carrying CIA employees, killing 2 and injuring 3. On June 18, 2010, convicted murderer Ronnie Lee Gardner was executed by firing squad in Utah. This method of execution has sparked widespread criticism from the public. Gardner became the third person to be executed by firing squad in the U.S. since 1976 and remains the last one to this day. He chose firing squad as his method of execution before that practice was banned in Utah in 2004. In 2004, execution by firing squad was officially allowed only in the state of Oklahoma. A resident of North Texas, 44-year-old Jason Thornburg, was sentenced to death for a series of horrific murders that shocked the community. In September 2021, Thornburg killed 3 people in the town of Euless, dismembered their bodies, and burned them, claiming his actions were for human sacrifices. The victims were 1 man and 2 women. Thornburg lured them to a motel room, where he committed the murders, and then dismembered the bodies in the bathroom. He hid the remains in garbage bags under the bed, and then took them out in plastic containers to the dump, where he burned them. When firefighters arrived at the scene, they found charred fragments of bodies, which kicked off the investigation. Thornburg was arrested thanks to surveillance footage that captured his car near the dumpster at the time of the fire. During the interrogation, he confessed to the murders, claiming he acted for religious reasons, hearing voices that called for sacrifices. In addition to these crimes, Thornburg also confessed to killing his ex-girlfriend, Tana Begay, in 2017, and his roommate, Mark Jewell, in May 2021. In the first case, he burned the bodies to cover up the signs of beating, and in the second, he staged a gas explosion. The defense tried to prove that Thornburg was insane, citing his diagnosis of schizophrenia and auditory hallucinations. However, the jury rejected this version and found him guilty, emphasizing that he poses a threat to society. Prosecutors described him as the embodiment of evil, noting that Thornburg used the Bible to justify his actions. The victims' relatives spoke in court, hoping for justice and comparing Thornburg to Satan. Now Jason Thornburg is awaiting his execution, which could take several years due to mandatory appeals. On December 19th, the last execution of 2024 took place in the American state of Oklahoma. The executed man was a 45-year-old who was accused of murdering a 10-year-old girl. The man was executed on his own birthday by lethal injection. Earlier, his request for clemency was denied by the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board. The United States remains one of the few countries where the death penalty is still practiced. It is imposed for the most serious crimes. both men and women can be sentenced to the death penalty. However, in recent years, many states have been moving away from the death penalty for crimes that are not related to murder. And now, friends, I want to make you a very interesting offer. You have a unique opportunity to become part of our team. If you have video editing skills, can voice over videos in Russian, English, and other languages, or write interesting scripts, we would love to work with you. Message our Telegram bot. The link is in the description. We would be happy to work with you. Message our Telegram bot. The link is in the description.